Okay, so let me see here. Tasmat, from there. Bhruvah, of the eyebrows. Antaram, in between. Unanyata, should be brought in. Niruddha, by blocking. Sapta, 7. Ayatanaha, outlets of the life air. Anap, anapekshaha, independent of all material enjoyment. Stitva, by keeping. Muhurta, of a moment. Ardham, sorry. Half. Akuntha, back home, back to Godhead. Drishtahi, one whose aim is targeted like that. Nirbhidya, punching. Murudhan, the cerebral hole. Vishrajit, should give up this body. Param, the supreme. Gataha, having gone to. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Therefore, the bhakti yogi should push the life air up between the eyebrows, and then blocking the 7 outlets of the air, life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he is completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connection, having gone to the Supreme. Purport. The process of giving up material connection and returning home back to Godhead, the Supreme, is recommended herein. This condition is that one should be completely freed from desire for material enjoyment. There are different grades of material enjoyments in respect to duration of life and sense gratification. The highest plane of sensual enjoyment for the longest period of time is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 9.20. All are but material enjoyments, and one should be thoroughly convinced that he has no need of such a long duration of life, even in the Brahmaloka planet. He must return home back to Godhead and must not be attracted by any amount of material facilities. In the Bhagavad Gita 2.59, it is said that this sort of material detachment is possible to attain when one is acquainted with the supreme association of life. Parang drishtva nivartate. One cannot be freed from material attraction unless he has complete understanding of the nature of spiritual life. The propaganda by a certain class of impersonalists that spiritual life is void of all variety is dangerous propaganda to mislead the living beings into becoming more and more attracted by material enjoyments. As such, persons with poor fund of knowledge cannot have any conception of the Param, the Supreme. They try to stick to their varieties of material enjoyments, although they may flatter themselves as being Brahman realized souls. Such less intelligent persons cannot have any conception of Param, as mentioned in this verse, and therefore they cannot reach the Supreme. The devotees have a full knowledge of the spiritual world. The personality of Godhead and His transcendental association is in the unlimited spiritual planets are called Vaikuntha Lokas. Herein, Akunta Drishti is mentioned. Akunta and Vaikuntha convey the same import, and only one who has his aim fixed upon the spiritual world and personal association with the Godhead can give up his material connection even while living in the material world. This Param and the Parang Dhama, mentioned in several places in the Bhagavad Gita, are one and the same thing. One who goes to the Parang Dhama does not return to this material world. This freedom is not possible even by reaching the topmost loka of this material world. The life air passes through 7 openings, namely 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Generally, it passes through the mouth at the time of an ordinary man's death. But the yogi, as above mentioned, who controls the life air in his own way, generally releases the life air by puncturing the cerebral hole in the head. The yogi therefore blocks up all the above mentioned 7 openings so that the life air will naturally burst forward through the cerebral hole. This is the sure sign of a devotee's leaving the material connection. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurinitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Sopadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadangamam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shcha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savidutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vijakan Vitam Shcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Chagadate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kandu Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripe Vanchakalpatarvasya Kripa Sindhuvya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminitaname Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminitaname Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Prasharni Nirvisesa Srinivadi Pashadidasarni Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmashbhatakakritim Adaram Sarva Vidyanam Haya Gribam Upasmahe. So the process of a yogi, specifically here mentioned, a bhakti yogi, is described, and we see here that is particularly being described to a bhakti yogi because it says he's devoid of all material desires, and that he's aiming to go back home, back to Godhead. So there's many different ways generally as we yogis try to transcend this world, and this is one of the primary processes by which they do so, and to generally enter into the heavenly planets. And so Prabhupada he is making that point throughout the purport here, that there are different grades of material enjoyments, that in this world, even within this world, there's different levels of material enjoyments that you can have. You can have the material enjoyment you get in India is different to the material enjoyment you get in America. The material enjoyment you get in Australia is different. The material enjoyment you get in Africa is different. So different grades of enjoyment according to the mode of material nature you're in and the body you're given. So according to the body you're given, you can only enjoy to a certain extent. So the materialists of this world, the people on the platform of a human being, they try to enjoy in many ways and try to expand their enjoyment. Anywhere you go, that is the purpose of life, is to expand your enjoyment. So the expansion of enjoyment is the purpose of the conditioned soul, is to have that sense gratification. And that is you could say in one sense, is become the inherent nature of the conditioned soul, that he wants sense gratification, sense enjoyment, and therefore his cycle of birth and death. But if we really analyze, the standard of material enjoyment in this world is very, very insignificant compared to what you can get in the heavenly planets. So the people trying to expand their knowledge within this world of how to enjoy better is actually a little bit foolish. Because if you actually go to places like India, those who are in knowledge of the Vedas, they know how to really enjoy. They know that by performing certain activities, ritualistic activities, that in the next life they will be elevated to a heavenly planet with which body they can enjoy much, much, much more. But the people of this age, materialists, they don't know that. So they try to enjoy, and more or less you can say this is like a hog and a dog sort of enjoyment in this world. Because one ultimately is restricted by old age, by the body becoming too tired, by the body not being very beautiful, the body not having much endurance. So the enjoyment that a person gets in this world is like very insignificant compared to what you would get in the heavenly planets. So a person who's a little bit more intelligent, you could say, he starts to see how he can expand his enjoyment beyond this world. Or, if one really thinks about it, how not to just enjoy in this body, but how can I develop a better body by which I can enjoy much more, right? That's the whole push now in this new age, is that, that we can manipulate the DNA to bring out a baby that is perfectly fine and that has very strong body, he's very healthy, he's very competent, he's very smart. So they're trying to achieve that that the role of karma is that it's not going to allow it to happen. But if one understands the Vedas, if he tries to study the Vedas, then one can actually attain a body within the material world in a higher planet, by which he can have unlimited enjoyment. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti deva vrta devan, pitrin yanti pitrivrtaha, bhutani yanti bhutejya, yanti madhyajani pimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship the ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. So that's there. There's another quote that I wanted to quickly. That those who drink the Soma Rasa of the Vedas. What verse is that, Mithun? Do you know? No, it's like in 9 something. I had it up, but I lost it. So those who study the Vedas, they desire to drink the Soma Rasa of the heavenly planets. Those who are followers of the Vedas, they particularly worship the demigods. And Krishna says, as we're reading every day in 723 or 24, that 723, that he is the person that gives the intelligence by which they can worship the demigods. So antavatu phalam tesham tad bhavati alpamedasam devan deva yajo yanti mad bhakta yanti mam api. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotee ultimately reaches my supreme planet. So in this verse, he uses this word alpamedhasam. So although they're following the Vedas and they are attaining, they're a little bit more, you could say they're far more intelligent than what a normal materialist is, who tries to grossly enjoy his senses, because they are on the path of the Vedas. But they're still, Krishna calls them alpamedasam, people of small intelligence, very stupid by nature. So it says here that, so in this, actually in the Bhagavatam, the description of what a heavenly planet is like is given also. Actually, this is a sub-heavenly planet, which is lower, and generally this is, in the sub-heavenly planets there's demons, and they enjoy much more than even the demigods in the heavenly planets. But it says, Prahlad Maharaj says that it is a replicated heavenly planet. So we can get an idea of, I couldn't particularly find the descriptions of the heavenly planets per se, but we can get an idea of what exactly the heavenly planets are like. Since the residents of these planets drink and bathe in the juices and exari made from wonderful herbs, they are freed from all anxieties and physical disease. They have no experience of gray hair, wrinkles, or invalidity. Their bodily lusts do not fade. Their perspirations do not cause a bad smell, and they are not troubled by fatigue or by lack of energy or enthusiasm due to old age. So can you imagine that? That's like being like a 15-year-old. Even a 15-year-old gets tired, you know. Or it smells nasty generally in 15-year-olds. So you know, when you're in high school, everyone's not smelling so nice if they don't have deodorant on. So you can imagine that in the heavenly planets, there's no like need to think about a higher form of life to some extent. Actually, in the next verse, Prahlad Maharaj says something. This is actually Prahlad Maharaj speaking here. He says something really amazing. He says, they live very auspiciously and do not fear death for anything. But death's established time, which is the effulgence of the Sudarshan Chakra of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these persons who are elevated to the platform of a demigod, they can enjoy very nicely. There's no feeling of anxiety. There's no feeling of fear. There's no feeling of distress. Your body is completely healthy, very beautiful. All the women around you are very beautiful. They sing very nicely. The food is like, you can't even imagine it. The beauty, you can't even imagine it. And none of these things degrade at all. Whereas, you know, the beauty we have, or some of us may have, some of us don't have, they degrade. They degrade. And like you're saying, the hair becomes gray, or the hair falls out completely. And like, so nowadays, 23-year-olds are completely bald. Oh, sorry. No offense to. It's good for you in your case. So, so, and generally, so therefore, there's like a whole industry of this hair growth. It's like $40,000 to get your hair implanted on your head. So people, these are the things that give one's existence enjoyment, and they desire to enjoy that, but because of their impious activities, they're not able to do it. So, but they go on trying in artificial ways, like implanting hair on your head, putting Botox in your face, putting in, artificial breasts, artificial butts. I don't know, so many things nowadays. I don't know, that was when I was still in high school, but nowadays I don't know what they have. Now you can like make your face look like young. You got these like superstars who are like 70 years old and they still look somewhat young on pictures, but then you see them in person, it's like, oh, that's kind of nasty. It's like you can see they've like tried to mess with their skin, but on picture they look nice. Like what they do nowadays is, when you play you watch movies, you look like you see Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he doesn't look much different from when he was playing in the Terminator. And like, how is that possible? And then because you feel like, oh, I used to watch him as a kid, he must be the same age still. But you look him up and he's like 70 years old. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's freaking old. So what they did, they put like a CGI, like what does CGI exactly means? Yeah, computer generated image. They put that over the face of that person, and then they look like they're like 20 again, 25 again. And there's this whole illusion of that, oh, you can stay young forever, that this person, look at the superstars, they're staying young. But actually they're growing old, they're suffering, their bodies falling apart. There's this video I saw. It said this guy was asking an older man who looked like a businessman, well-to-do. He's like, what does it feel like to be an old man, like 68 or 70 he was? And he says, you know what it feels like? He's like, what? He's like, it feels like you were tackled yesterday in a football match, and you woke up this morning and every part of your body hurts, and you feel tired and you have no energy, and you can't eat much either. You don't have an appetite. And then you go into the bathroom, you look into the mirror and you realize you're old. And like, damn, I forgot that I was old. So that nature of that youthful nature is so much present in the nature of the spirit soul that we forget that this body, it goes through so much suffering. But if one wants a higher level of suffering, he says has to follow the prescriptions of the Vedas. You can go to the heavenly planets and enjoy life much better. But what's the problem there? That like it doesn't seem very bad, right? Like you don't get old. And these is like some of the qualities that you also have in Vaikuntha. You have an eternal body that never gets old. It's always freshful and youthful and all these things. More or less very similar. But the difference is that, as Prahlad Maharaj described, that ultimately death is waiting for them. So therefore Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, death I am, time I am, the destroyer of all. It's just a matter of time until the pious activities are completely depleted, and then they have to return to, Bhagavad Gita particularly says that they return to this earthly planet again. And they fall away, and when they're falling from the heavenly planets, they're seeing others enjoy. And they're feeling great anxiety from that, seeing that sense enjoyment or happiness that others are experiencing. And so they return to this material world, and again undergo so many different sufferings. So Prabhupada goes on to make the point here that all are but material enjoyments, and one should be thoroughly convinced that he has no need of such a long duration of life, even in the Brahma Loka planet. He must return back to Godhead and must not be attracted by any amount of material facilities. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that this sort of material detachment is possible possible to attain one is acquainted with the supreme association of life. Param drishtva nivartate. One cannot be free from material attraction unless he has complete understanding of the nature of spiritual life. So therefore now he goes on, the propaganda by a certain class of impersonalists that spiritual life is void of all varieties is dangerous. Propaganda to mislead the living entity becomes the propaganda to mislead the living beings into becoming more and more attracted by material enjoyments. So as such, persons with a poor fund of knowledge cannot have any conception of Param, the Supreme. They try to stick to the varieties of material enjoyments, although they flatter themselves as being Brahman realized souls. So we can see the Mayavadis that is being addressed here, that they preach this idea of this oneness or this impersonalist aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be the topmost supreme thing. And so Prabhupada is making the comment that by doing this, they become more and more attracted by material enjoyments. Now, actually the Mayavadis actually are more strict than us in a real Mayavadi. He's more strict than a devotee in Krishna consciousness in following the rules and regulations of the Vedas to a great extent. Like the Mayavadis, they don't eat salt. They don't eat very fancy food. They'll eat like the same bland, no salt, no nothing food every day, day in, day out, from when they're young to when they're old, no problem. They'll perform many different sort of asanas and all these things. But why is Prabhupada saying that? By propagating this conception, people become more and more materialistic. Why is it that Prabhupada is saying that? How do you become more materialistic? Because the idea of Mayavad philosophy is that you stop all materialism, right? That up to that, Prabhupada also says that we agree with them up to this point. We agree to them up to the point of detaching from the material world. All the philosophy is the same up until that point. Why is it that they're attracted by material enjoyment again? Why is it that although they're performing all these activities and seeing, they're thinking that this Brahman aspect is the supreme most thing? Why is it that they're attracted again by the material energy? Why is it that they're attracted by material enjoyments? They're not getting. Well, they say that is bliss. That Brahman is. Right. So they're attracted by material enjoyments again because the nature of the jiva is to have variety. Prabhupada, I think in this he says specifically that spiritual life is void of all varieties, is dangerous. That this idea that spiritual life everything is one, everything is the same, there's no difference. This is very dangerous because the spirit soul by nature is he likes variety. It's actually the nature of the spiritual soul is like that it wants variety, that there is variety in the spiritual realm. So when you cast this idea that above this material world, in the spiritual, what is the spiritual realm, there is no variety, it's a very awkward situation for the jiva. It's a very awkward situation to be in. Because we can see that variety is superior to just oneness, to everything being the same. We have practical experience of how variety gives us much more sense of happiness, enjoyment, than this oneness. So actually Prabhupada writes this letter to this K.M. Munishi. So he says, Dear Munishi ji, actually I'll just read the part that is in particular importance of what he's saying here, Prabhupada's saying here. He says that, if I remember rightly, you've been criticizing in the meeting of the 16th instance about the culture of Hollywood cinemas. The Mayavadi philosophy, having killed the spiritual variegatedness of the Supreme Being, the people are generally attracted in the variegatedness of material existence. In the Vedanta Sutras, we have direct information about how a spiritual identity is joyful, full of spiritual bliss. The idea of enjoyment is focused through a material, and as such, the spiritual focus is reflected in a perverted manner. The attention of the people in general is attracted by the cinemas in the place of temples, because the Mayavadi philosophy, impersonality of Godhead, has created a void in the spiritual realm. But in fact, the spiritual realm is not at all void. It is full of variegatedness of spiritual mellows. If you create a void in the spiritual unnecessarily, you have to create a fill up in the material existence. And that is the cause of why temples are being replaced by vulgar cinemas. So Prabhupada is making that point, that because the idea of spiritual is this voidness, there has to be something that fills that desire of the soul, which is variety. So then if you don't have spiritual variety, you have to fill it with some other variety. And then that variety becomes a material variety. So So then Prabhupada is saying you have cinemas, you have these gentlemen clubs, you have the parks and the swimming pools and the beaches and all these national parks. So they're now attracted by this material variety. Because variety is beautiful. Because ultimately on the spiritual platform, that is what's there. There is ultimate variety. There's the variety in the material, in the spiritual world doesn't cause one great suffering like it does in the material world. So by understanding this point of that how impersonalism causes actually the greatest desire for material enjoyment. Because even if one does attain that Brahman platform, this Brahman nirvana of just oneness, which is possible, which is a form of liberation, still that soul has to descend again back into the material world because of the desire of variety. Because the soul, particularly like you're saying, that the soul's desire is the relationship. That is what the happiness is derived of. You can derive a level of happiness of this nothingness, you could say this Brahman happiness, is there to some extent, and which is just a cessation of all your miseries. Just like, Prabhupada is first going through that material enjoyments. One can enjoy on the heavenly planets, but then eventually one does become frustrated by the idea of going up and down. And then he has to try to attain some idea of liberation. And then this misconception arises of impersonalism, and that everything is suffering. Therefore, the ultimate goal is to just merge and not have any relationships, not have any of these things. So a person on this path of impersonalism suffers greatly. And a person on this impersonalist path, or this path of Mayavadism, he is particularly not favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he says in 16 and 19, I think this is the divine and the demoniac section. He says, the divine and the demoniac section. He says that those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. So for the Mayavadis, there's no question of advancement of spiritual life. That it is the greatest material desire to want to be God, to want to be the supreme most being. So they're cast by the Supreme Personality. He condemns them heavily. He's the only persons, more or less, they're the only persons that don't get that opportunity for devotional service for millions and millions of lives, because they're deep envy for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one has to, that door is open. So one has to understand that the supreme realization is actually in that relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The ultimate goal is not energy. Guru Maharaj gives the whole class on, like he says, how people say energy is the supreme and all this, but he actually says that the rasa is supreme, the relationship, the taste of the mellows of a relationship between the jiva and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the topmost thing. And so when one realizes that point, then not only is he free of material desire, but he also becomes liberated in this material world. Whereas you could say, in one sense, the Mayavadis, they sternly and they force themselves to be free of material desire. They try their level best to stop engaging in any sort of activity and completely restrain. But Prabhupada is making the point that in the Bhagavad Gita 2.59, it is said that this sort of material detachment is possible to attain when one is acquainted with the supreme association of life. Supreme association life is that association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his paraphernalia, his devotees. So, by doing that, the sense of material desire is shed away. That the more one advances in devotional service, the more that his material desires subside. Prabhupada says one's spiritual advancement can be judged by the level of sex desire that he has. And so just like, by hearing you become attracted to heavenly enjoyment. Just like by hearing in this world we become attracted to the enjoyments of this world. When we were young, the reason we trying to do so many different types of things is because we heard from so many different people, this is the way to enjoy life. This is the way to become happy. So hearing is the primary source of learning, and therefore in spiritual life, in Krishna consciousness, we are reshaping that. And therefore we're having Bhagavatam class every day. Therefore we're reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day. Therefore we're hearing so many lectures from our own spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada every day. So by hearing and understanding the nature, as Prabhupada says, one cannot be free from material attraction unless he has a complete understanding of the nature of spiritual life. So we're trying to understand this nature of spiritual life. What is that nature? What is that inherent nature of that spiritual life? So by understanding that, we can become free from all material attraction. Therefore we read the Bhagavatam. Therefore we are advised to Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. That we are advised to eternally serve the Srimad Bhagavatam, eternally read the Srimad Bhagavatam, eternally hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. But because by hearing so, the Lord in the heart is established, as this chapter is entitled, The Lord in the Heart. He is established as an irrevocable fact. So by hearing this Bhagavatam, by studying this Bhagavatam, we can understand the nature of the spiritual nature. We don't have to speculate that we're lucky enough. We don't have to try to speculate like the Mayavadis or like the impersonalists or the philosophers of this age. We don't have to speculate. We simply have to read and understand with our intelligence and apply the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And so by doing that, that material desire within the heart is completely eradicated. And that is the path of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is the particularly for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that is their ultimate motive, to have no material desire at all. That their desire is completely redirected towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhakti Vinod Thakur actually prays in this way in his Gitavali. See if I can bring it up. He says that I desire the association of such devotees that are free of all these different material attachments. Here we go. Let me see here. See if I can find it. I'm not going to be able to find it. Okay, I'm not going to be able to find it here. Okay. Okay, maybe this one here. Okay, I'm not going to be able to find it. But he particularly prays for that let me have that association of devotees who are free from all these attraction to material enjoyment and these different varieties of material enjoyment and the desire for even the heavenly planets. Because even the Bhagavatam describes there are devotees who have these, they are devotees of the Supreme Personality Godhead, but they have desires to go and enjoy in the heavenly planets still. So actually the Bhagavatam, I can't remember what area it's in, there's a description that's Prabhupada also comments on how a person in the heavenly planet, he enjoys sex, he has sex enjoyment unrestrictedly. And the women in those heavenly planets, they don't even get pregnant. And that the women in the heavenly planets are also, they're always sexually stimulated, he mentions. But those persons who are in those heavenly planets, they're devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if one wants that, one can even have that, but it's not very desirable because it can actually, you can cause a fall down even in the heavenly planets that one can even forget the Supreme Personality of Godhead in that realm of enjoyment. So it's a very dangerous situation to put oneself in. And it also described that some persons who along in his journey back to Godhead, that if he's attracted by material enjoyment, he may go to the heavenly planets, enjoy there for some time, and then go to the spiritual world. So if you want that, then that's also there. But we don't want to take that chance of going to the heavenly planets. And then if in the heavenly planets one becomes bewildered, then he spends 10,000 years up in the heavenly planets, comes back down, and Kali Yuga's progress and the movement of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is ended, and then you're in a little bit of a mess. Now you're back into the cycle of birth and death, birth and death, birth and death. So we have to perform Ahituki Bhakti, that bhakti which is one-pointed, and it is not disrupted by any sort of material desire at all. That is the goal of the Krishna consciousness movement. That there is no room, more or less, for demigod worship. Whereas in different Vaishnava traditions, there's room for that, right? Like Sri Vaishnava. No, not within Madhva Sampradaya.
Yeah, but anyway, Madhvas
they allow some level of worship to the demigods and things like that. So you'll see in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there's complete, utter Atma Nivedana. That is the mood of Gaudiya Vaishnava. Atma Nivedana, he completely surrenders himself to the Supreme Personality Godhead. As we read through the Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs, how he is doing that. And we read throughout different Acharyas' songs how they're doing that. We see that they're devoid of material desire, at least, although they are devoid of material desire, they're praying. And they're praying that they have no such desires at all. So, okay, let me see here. Maybe I found it. Okay. So, you can see how they're praying here by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Gitavali. It says that, my dear mind, you have not thought of this. You have not thought of this. You are very wicked. Oh, you are deeply sunk in the poison of worldly sense gratification. You are overwhelmed by lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and so on. Oh, you are under the sway of the enemy. You are attracted by the thirst of hearing mundane news, enjoying material sense object, and seeking liberation. Oh, you think that nonsensical talk sounds very pleasant. You have become crushed by the desire for fame, as well as by hypocrisy and crooked dealings. Oh, you are not very simple or straightforward. You are completely surrounded, dear brother, by all these inauspicious signs of death. Oh, these are indeed your deadly enemies. If you do not give all these things, then how will you attain Radha Krishna? Oh, carefully abandon, just abandon them. Other than the association of sadhus, where else is your real benefit to be found? Oh, just keep company of the saintly devotees. Just immerse yourself in the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, and all unwanted things will disappear. Oh, just think about all this for once and see yourself. So, a devotee, he understands all these different problems, or the problems the mind poses, and the material enjoyment that one actually has, and he forcibly puts himself in the association of Vaishnavas. And he serves the lotus feet of those Vaishnavas. And he, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur particularly mentions here, that you bathe in the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. What does that mean? That means we serve the Vaishnava without any other motive at all, but to please their desire, to completely give them full satisfaction. And so by doing that, as we read in the Bhagavad Gita, that, how does this verse go? That approaching a spiritual master serving. Approaching a tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tadvidarshana. That he will grant us this understanding of the nature of spiritual life, because he has seen the truth. He will grant us the truth. So by serving those great Mahajans who are present in this world, or not present, or not manifest, you could say, that we can attain that understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can become completely fixed in that. And for us, we don't particularly have to go through this process of focusing the life air between the eyebrows and blocking the 7 outlets and all these things. As the Ishopanishad says, Vayur anilam amritam atedam bhashmantam sariram om krito smara kritam smara, and then krito smara kritam smara om krito smara kritam smara. So it says that let the life airs become completely blocked up. At the time of death, all these life airs may completely become blocked up, and I may not be able to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But please remember what I've done. Please remember what I've done. So we may not be able to do this process, especially in this age. Like, what is the question of controlling all this life air and all these things. Forget it. Because the practice is such an intense practice actually. So we expect by serving the Vaishnava utterly without any motivations, material motivations, we expect the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We expect the mercy of the spiritual master at the time of death. We may not be, some of us may not even get that opportunity to think about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or maybe not that opportunity not to even hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the time of death. We don't know where we're going to be, what situation we're going to be. But if we've served our life with a pure motive, with a proper motive, with that attitude of, yes, I have these material desires, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, which he doesn't. If we constantly endeavor, although with those material desires, we have those material desires, but we're constantly endeavoring in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at the time of death, we're guaranteed back home, back to Godhead. That because we put aside those material desires and we completely serve the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when we do not consider ourselves to me, myself, and I, but we consider ourselves to be His, to be the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one becomes very much situated in his proper place to go back home, back to Godhead. I'm just finding one more song that we were chanting. Let me see here. Articulated. No, it's not articulated. Okay, I'm not going to be able to find it next time. I'm going to have to pull it up a little earlier before. Okay, so that all these things are here, that there, the material enjoyment, the bewilderment from the Mayavadis, the false propagation of spiritual life. So if we are able to, and luckily for us we have to this point, go beyond all these things and all these different philosophers that are propounding to so many things, they're coming so close to attract us to so many different material enjoyments. We can simply remain at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, lotus feet of the spiritual master. Then we are guaranteed, as also the Bhagavatam describes, that Srila Prabhupada comments in one verse that he simply has to wait. That he just waits. He just performs his duty in devotion service, and he just waits. Just like a father, when he dies, he hands over that what is that called? The merits to the son. Inheritance merits. Inheritance to the son. Similarly, the devotee who is performing devotion service, he has that right at the end of his life. So if we go on performing service like that, we don't have to be fearful of time at all. So I'll end my class there. Is there any questions or comments or corrections? 30 seconds. And demoniac, yeah. Mm. Yeah. So in Vedic culture, there's like the sadhus are there, right? That they're performing some sort of Vedic rituals and sacrifices. So even in the purports of the Bhagavatam, when Narada Muni as a kid, he's serving this, and actually in the translation is like that it says one should serve the impersonalists or something like that. I can find it, I can show it to you afterwards. So the understanding is there that generally like a sadhu is to be served. But we see even Prabhupada saying that. Now maybe Vishnu Chitta Prabhu can comment on that. And me exactly, I don't know exactly how. That's another question that I'm...
Sadhu. But the point is that liberation means they're getting out of the material world. But because of a lack of knowledge of the Supreme Personality's characteristics, they go out of this material world, but they don't go to the spiritual world. So they come down here back again. So they do achieve liberation. Anybody wants to achieve liberation, personalists or impersonalists, they achieve liberation. What happens after liberation is different between the Vaishnavas and the impersonalists. The impersonalists can't even say when because they are already beyond the realm of time. But still, because the natural nature of the spirit soul is to engage in activity, if they have no knowledge of spiritual activity, then then they will come back to the material world because that is the only realm of activity they are aware of. So yes, you can attain liberation.
Okay, so I have to read some quotes here. Let me see here. I don't think so. No. Okay, I'll just read off the table here. It is the Sankirtan, which is life and soul of our movement. The quotes from Srila Prabhupada present here are in the chronological order to give a little feel for the evolution of Sankirtan and preaching in our Krishna consciousness movement. We can see how wonderfully Srila Prabhupada encourages devotees in their preaching efforts, going from the street chanting and free pamphlet distribution to book printing and distributing as our most important activity. Hare Krishna. Which one am I reading? This one? Keep going. So here it is said Kripana. Kripanan. Kripanan means these people, these conditioned souls, they are not endeavoring for liberation from this material world. They are so callous, foolish, just like cats and dogs, eating, sleeping, and mating. That is their happiness. So they are reluctant. Nobody is interested in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, by the grace of Krishna, you have to adopt such means that they may be interested a little about Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, they are so dull and miserly, they do not understand Krishna consciousness movement is very, very important for them. They have no sense even to understand. But the preacher who is Krishna conscious, he knows that without Krishna consciousness, these people are condemned. They cannot be happy. They cannot be liberated. They will simply remain within this material world, accepting one body after another. And whichever material body we accept, it is meant for suffering. It is not meant for any happiness. These three kinds of material miseries, Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika, Adhidaivika, he has to undergo. Okay, is that it? So, okay. Don't we want to read the bit which says so? Then, okay, all right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So,